Go stand by in three, two, one. You're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, and something today is really valuable. Since 1993, Drama Dogs has been in Santa Barbara, and boy, I have a terrific chronology of all the things they've done for our community. But sideline is that Kenneth Gilbert, and Ebony Lewis were co-artistic directors from the get-go of 1993 till today. And all of the students over the years that they've influenced, and all of the thespians and all of the designers and the sound guys and they've influenced so much of Santa Barbara drama and elsewhere. And they had a certain style of drama that Kenneth and Bonnie both brought their separate disciplines. Bonnie's background as a dancer, Ken is a movement person. They brought a certain style to Santa Barbara, and it became in their hands a hallmark. And so I received an email that Kenneth, who I've known and seen perform, I don't know how many times in one man shows and many other shows. He's also directed so many of the shows at Drama Dogs. And we had a great opportunity to sit together and talk about his his philosophy a couple years back over at their house. And I heard that something phenomenal was happening. So, okay, let's cast your mind back, listeners. So you are a college kid, and you you say, well, okay, I want very much to challenge myself, and I'm going to be a drama major, first of all. And this is in the 70s. I'm going to be a drama major. Now, I'm going to be a drama major, but it's a very challenging curriculum, and there's a lot of competition. So for my uh, graduation thesis, I'm going to take the hardest playwright I know and the hardest philosophy I know to put on stage, and I'm going to tackle it myself. And I'm going to be in my 20s. Okay, that was done. Kenneth Gilbert did that. Now, 50 years later, we're celebrating 50 years in the theater. And Kenneth says, I'm going to petition UC Davis, my alma mater, and I'm going to say to them, I'm going to remount these very challenging productions, and I'm going to restage them, and I want you to recognize them, and I want you to accept some of the archives around them. And they say, oh, wow, nobody's done this before, but heck yeah. And I think it's fantastic. Okay, so if you couch it like this, there's we're going to talk about two productions that Kenneth is actually remounting. Um, and they're both Albert Camus, the existentialist author. They're both uh, extremely challenging, first of all, because well, let me just throw it out this way. How do you personify existentialism, which is a non-thing, on a living stage? First of all, that's your first question. Second question is, how can you do that when you're in your 20s, and how can you do that when you're in your 60s, 70s? Because those are the two sort of anchor pins of a person's life. So how do you do that? How do you make that live both stages of life? The stage of I can do it because I'm innocent, and the stage of I can do it because I am full of experience. Both have problems in mounting such a production, right? So anyway, I am pleased to introduce Kenneth Gilbert, my friend for years, but also Ebony Lewis, my friend for years, both co-artistic directors of Drama Dogs. And over the years, almost 20 years, I've been covering Drama Dogs and seen many productions. And I fell in love with Ken when he did a one-man show of a famous French artist. And I thought he carried it off absolutely brilliantly. And that was years ago. And I've watched him ever since. What was fascinating was I asked Bonnie if she'd send me some of the chronology of Drama Dogs and some of the past history of Ken, Ken himself. And you haven't changed much. I'm looking at pictures of when you're like 19, 20 years old, and you haven't changed as performing at UC Davis. You haven't changed, but I still recognize you. There's plenty of people I wouldn't have recognized. I can look at you performing, and not only can I see your body and how you move, but I can see your face. And that's pretty remarkable too. I was got my magnifying glass out. I was like, that's Ken for sure. Huh. And he's a kid. He's a kid. He's a skinny kid.
Very
And
good.
yes, it was fantastic. So let me start with that question. Bonnie, I want you to chip in too. I love you.
No, that's okay.
And I want you to chip in too. How do you remount Albert Camus, having it deep in your memory bank for 50 years? It's a nihilistic play. It's about nothing. It's about no. How does that work on stage, Kenan?
Well, in the essay, The Myths of Sisyphus, Albert Camus identified the absurd man, and he said that we have three choices about how to live our life. We can suicide, we just quit on it, we just let it go, because we can't push the boulder up the mountain and let it fall down. We've just got to leave. The other is intellectual suicide or hope, where I can't believe that it's inside of me to just sustain this life and this existence. I must look to religion or something outside of me and give that my life force. The third is the option to say, wow, this is an absurd world. I have nothing but the moment. And in my moment of clarity, I can look at my life, and I chose to say as an actor. He identifies the actor as an absurd man in the essay as well. So there was my premise and thesis, where he had a four-act play, Caligula, and his novella, The Stranger. And I looked at those and said, one is a man who struggles with his lack of becoming a deity. He cannot live outside of immortality. He is only mortal. And the other says, in my mortal years, I will die. And so I looked at the contrast of saying, if the actor is the absurd man, the artist that lives only in the moment, now what can I do to be in the moment as the actor, playing one man who doesn't arrive at a place of clarity and the other who does, who then at the very end is facing his death at a guillotine. So that was the setup, and because I was choosing an academic study rather than the MFA, I just didn't want to audition for the MFA program, and I just didn't want to go through the throes of what that. I wasn't confident, and this, in my most recent years, understanding that I am an autistic, I just realized now, looking back, that I was frightened of somebody seeing me without my controlling that, and that I needed to be able to be in my own stead, my own freedom to choose. So I petitioned the department to do an academic thesis and perform it. They had done that years before until they mounted their MFA program. And so they said, well, we already have an MFA program. You did an audition, so why are you going to perform it? I said, because I'm going to justify it academically. I'm going to give you a thesis that says this is how Albert Camus looked at the actor as an absurd man, like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the mountain, like Caligula cannot do it, and like Marceau accepts it at the very end. So it was they got intrigued with it, and I could support it. So I ended up with an 80 plus page thesis and performed it on stage at the small studio theater there. Did it only one time, and said, this is it. This is the absurdity of who I am as an actor. Now, I had no idea at 25 or 26 that I would find my way as an artist. I came from truckers and farmers, and Bonnie and I knew each other. We had met the summer before I went into the graduate program, a year before that. And she and I had what I called the egg beater talk, where I said, there's something going on inside of me that I cannot define. I cannot figure it out. Bonnie had been a performer already. She was a dancer and was finding her way that way. And we just found this resonance that was incredible. Our lives divided at that point when I went into my teaching credential year. And then a 17-year hiatus, and Bonnie and I got back there together in 89. So we're now headed towards 40 years old, and she and I got together in a marriage and said, let's do this. Let's live our lives as artists. And we accepted it for both of us. We see it in each other, and together we are really quite a powerhouse of vision and craft. I like
I'll
to use.
say, I'll say, that's for sure. Okay, so you answered my question. So the actual premise of the plays that you were performing sort of reinforced both your personal mindset and also your questioning for a meaning, actually. So through the performance. So okay, so this is my question now, Kenneth. So okay, you went through that in your 20s. You did this performance. You did something very untoward for the university. You were an academic actor before you were any other kind of actor. And now you're older, 50 years later, and you're saying, okay, I question where I was in my life and what would give me meaning then. But now you just finished your story, your setup there saying, Bonnie and I as artists have given not only meaning to each other, but to our community. So you found meaning. So where are you going to go with Camus now?
That's going to be the journey. I have a year and a half before I'll perform it. Bonnie will direct me, and we'll workshop it. We'll develop it into a performance piece beyond just the two monologues that I performed way back when at UC Davis. And we'll find a narrative between. So I see it as five parts. We'll introduce the context, text, then enter Caligula. Then I'll speak as the actor between, as the actor transforms from Caligula into Mersault. And then at the very end, speak to this amazing arrival of accepting the fact that I am an artist, that I live in the moment of my artistry, and that I have an incredible life partner, and that together we have found our way. And I get emotional. Here I'm almost 75 years old, and I had no idea at 25 years old that I would be talking as an artist at all, ever. That wasn't
But
a
it's so interesting. So that quest, that was the sort of the nut of what I wanted to interview you about. The quest there that was based in nothingness has ended up with a situation of entirely fruitful uh, career, community involvement. So this quest for nothingness has, no, this quest inside of nothingness.
yes, that I agree with. Yeah.
Yeah, the quest inside of nothingness has created an abundance, a Garden of Eden for us. And did it take you this long to realize you were an artist?
Yeah. I think
Yep.
he's still realizing it. But
That's
that's me speaking, right?
Okay, Bonnie, say that again. So
I
everybody
said
hear
I
you.
think that he's still realizing it. I think being an artist is ever evolving, and it's almost like a roller coaster. It's like, am I, aren't I? Maybe yes, maybe no. So there's that constant, and that's just the nature of being a human being. Um, Finding meaning, expressing meaning, wanting, for Ken and I, it's important to create and to express. And I don't know, and then Ken, I might be putting words into you. I don't know if we ever feel as if we truly arrive. It's always a state of arriving.
Okay, so I'm getting that. So the artist is in flux. The artist is always striving. But there has to have been, for Ken to undertake this terrific endeavor, there has to have been some sort of realization that he's
Right.
reached a milestone. I mean, that
yes,
was sort of obvious, right?
yes. When we celebrated, it was 2 years ago, when we celebrated our 32 years of doing theater in Santa Barbara, and Bonnie and I collaborated as directors on a piece we called Here, which was a journey into the woman, what is a woman of action and of self-worth, and what are the conflicts women in relationships have. That's what we mounted. We had come to a realization, or I had come to a realization in the summation of the 32 years, that I wanted to have some sort of history, some sort of legacy, that we were here, that we marked our place here, that we have had a chronology of work here. And so with all of that wrapping up, realized what happens when I go. I'm looking at the end now. I don't know how much longer I have. I'm looking at the end. 50 years ago, I wasn't looking at the end. I was looking at the beginning of struggle. I wasn't looking at anything coming to a finality. And so in my departure of this lifetime, I want to know that somebody has an inkling of memory of what I did. It doesn't have to be manifested. It just has to be a memory. And so stepping into wondering if UC Davis would hold the archive of our company, because I was a graduate from the drama department there, and looking at all of that and knowing that we have such material, we have the video, we have the photos, we have the scripts, we have all this stuff. It's in our office, in our home, and I don't want it to just all of a sudden be something tossed away in a bin.
Right, right. So here's a question for you. The the audience that you'll be before and some of the professors that you will be working with to remount the productions, restage the productions, redo your character study, etc. They're going to be closer to the age of yours when you started this whole journey.
That's right. That's right. Because
Now,
we're looking at, I think the chairman of the department is somewhere around 50, maybe 60. And that's significantly younger than me in regards to the fact that I'm returning. The fun thing for me was that I was speaking to the production supervisor at the campus, and when I was there, there was a staff or faculty of 11 or so, and they're down to 4. That's devastating to a performing arts department.
say that
And
again.
the department used to have a faculty of around 11 to do full productions, et cetera, et cetera. And now currently they are at a faculty of 4.
Why is that, Ken?
Budget, budget, budget. And the arts are the last to be funded in so many ways.
Yeah,
So
which
here
is
we
why
are.
we are so grateful that you and Bonnie were here since 1993 on, is when
Yeah,
things started.
and as I'm looking at it, I don't expect the department to fund this project. I just want them to sponsor it by letting me in and perform. So as I was talking to this woman, the production supervisor, she was sitting in a hallway, and I said, I know where you are, and I was describing where she was in relationship to the theater where I performed this one-man show. And she got intrigued by the whole process, and she said, I think you should do it here. And I said, yeah, it would be fun to go back into Studio A. And she said, no, on the main stage.
Oh, wow. Okay, okay, okay.
So
So,
this is still in the dream stage. It's still in the because we have to have approval from the department, and they're just struggling so much that they don't really have the freedom to talk openly about a future project like this. So I'm thinking ahead, wondering what it will take for it to be independently funded, and ask them then to just sponsor the space and let me in. I'll take my design team. Bonnie will go with me as director. We'll be an encapsulated group, like a traveling company, that would arrive at Davis to do it there. And the reason I'm doing it in Davis is because it will be where we leave our archives. It will be where we leave the premise of what this 25-year-old kid never dreamed of doing. It's extraordinary when I think about it. It's way beyond what my imagination ever thought. And this is only a new revelation. It only happened a few months ago. I have body work done every 2 weeks. And when I have the body work done, it's very deep tissue work. I go inside. It's like physical therapy for me, physical psychotherapy, somatic therapies, if you will. And so all of a sudden I was lying there and I thought, here it is. You've got to do this. And it took me a while to muster up the courage to mention it to Bonnie. And as I was sitting in the living room telling her, I burst into tears and I said, I'm excited and I'm scared and I want to do it. I just have to, particularly to leave our archive of our years of doing theater together, having met at Davis. It's just, there's so many loops that close with this whole process. She and I are extraordinary artists on our own, but because we have worked together in response to that, not because, in response to our working together, we have grown exponentially. We have challenged ourselves in ways that we wouldn't have dreamed of individually.
well, what a success story all around. I mean, I've got some pretty significant questions about the performances, the Caligula and the Mare Salt, both, and how you how you grappled with them then, how you're going to grapple with them now. I think what I'm hearing mostly, the nut of the interview, Richard will probably agree with me, is that this is all about bravery. And that is a super thing. I mean, I work with a lot of visual artists, and as you know, and the issue is how much of yourself do you expose? And,
Yes.
and so, and how much of you do you continuously expose? Where does it stop? And just I've told you this before, Ken, and Bonnie knows too. So my sister's a SAG-AFTRA artist in New York and Chicago. And when our family gets together, I never know which Nan, her name is Nan, I never know which Nan is going to show up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like almost a dangerous situation because you're like, okay, which side of womanness is going to show up here? Is it going to be Kali? Is it going to be Athena? Which one is going to show up, and then
Mm.
which one is going to implode or explode? And so there's a situation where here an actor doesn't necessarily know when to turn that off, as far as when I don't need exposure and when I do need exposure. And it sounds like what you were doing at Davis when you were very young in your 20s, you were saying, I don't necessarily want to be judged yet. I don't
Right.
want to be, I don't want to be exposed yet. Now you're taking the biggest leap of all, though. This is the biggest exposure because not only I was getting at this when I was talking to you about the ageism involved, where your professors are one-fourth of your age, for example. How do you handle that, where the perception is an actor, a person on stage, is necessarily the epitome of human beauty? How do you handle that? Yeah, you did okay when you were 20, for sure. You're absolutely beautiful performer physically and I'm sure performance-wise. But it's now like, okay, how do you make say a young thespian, a young MFA applicant, how do you make them understand that this is a body that is 70, and yes, it is functional, and yes, it can convey what I need it to convey. I find it, difficult because I have grandkids and I'm trying to explain to them that actually, this, you know what I'm saying? So how are you going to say this to I mean, basically, I got to say colleagues in their 20s and 30s?
Uh-huh.
How is, you see where I'm getting at here?
I do. Yeah. I see that. The chairman of my committee, my master's committee, did not really want me to do the project. He thought I needed to stay more academic. He didn't quite understand. He was a survivor of the war. He had a war injury that he hobbled with walking with a cane. He was a great man, great advisor because he was so intellectual, and I wasn't. I was intellectual through somatics rather than through cognition. And he and I would just butt heads, literally butt heads. We couldn't make sense out of each other, but we had accepted each other because he was chosen as my committee chairman. And I will never forget the moment when I completed the two monologues, stepped off stage. It was a small audience that was attending, and I walked out into the hallway, and he came down the stairs with his cane, and he looked at me and he said, "Impressive." So I had proven my thesis. I had proven that intellectually I could support this idea of something that is so misunderstood. Existentialism is not quite understood because it doesn't have a comparison to anything else. It's the absurdity of Sisyphus pushing the rock and choosing again to push the rock because that's and he almost defies the gods by saying, "I'm going to do it." He doesn't treat it as torture. He treats it as responsibility, particularly in the absurd frame when he says, "I will do this and I will be happy."
He chooses how he wants to do it. He
That's
makes
right.
the choice that being in each moment of moving the rock is good. I want
And
to
there's
do
yes,
that.
and the rock could be considered character. That push the and Bonnie and I are very much like this. We work go into the depths of working the character. We don't just memorize the lines and block it. We go inside the experience and wonder what is this. In rehearsal, she'll see something when I'm doing gesture, a movement, or a tone, and same thing I with her, and we'll play that out.
Yeah.
So we're pushing the rock up the mountain, and then as we get to the top, we let the rock fall down, and that's when we're ready for performance.
Okay, so now we're expanding into your technique with working with actors. and how this has developed over time. And this is a good time to shout out some of the important things about Drama Dogs, your company that has been around and performing actively since 1993. Um, Many workshops, Playfest Santa Barbara, for example, and then other community involvement, Santa Barbara Youth Theater. I remember covering that particular endeavor that you guys did. Santa Barbara High School District guest artists for many, many performances in the early noughts. A homeschool project, a teacher and stage director, and Santa Barbara Chamber Ballet, a theater coach, um, all kinds of public readings, cold readings, all kinds of theater spaces that I mean, all over the Central Coast, all that you've brought to schools, all that you've brought to young thespians. What's been interesting over the year, Bonnie and Ken both, and this is why I wanted so hard to cover this, is over the years, so many, when I interview, Ken and Bonnie are doing a performance, they're directing this performance. I want to see it. I can't wait to see it. And Bonnie brings me some of her key actors of say, let's say, a performance that you're doing. I think I'm trying to think of the many times that Bonnie's brought me, why don't we interview so and so along with Ken and myself? And we've done that. And your young performers adore that you've taught them so much. They just are full of, humility, I guess, that they have been allowed to work with you guys. I don't think, you know, here again, I'm comparing it to my sister, who many times she can't stand her directors, and they don't let her experience what she needs to experience about her performance, and
Yeah.
she hates them. And so she's, oh, I hate that guy. And but she needs to eat, so but the issue is I don't think in the 20 years I've been interviewing you all for KZSB, the performances that I've covered, your performers, even afterwards, they send me praise of how they are so happy to have worked with you. And I'm talking about UCSB level, City College level, and then professional actors as well, of some age. They they all seem to be able to carry forward something that you have given them, no matter where they are in the stage of their careers. Um, I think that's remarkable. But I guess, okay, so what's it like then? How does it work, Bonnie, now that you're going to be directing Ken in Caligula and Meersault? And sort of this is the apex, this is the Oscar ceremony. You know,
I can't go there, Elizabeth. If I do, I will shut down. This is,
okay.
do you know what I'm saying? It has to be, I'm now have started reading Ken's thesis, which is woof, eye-opening. It's like, oh, Ken, wow, get to learn all these new things about this person I've been living with for a very long time, which is very exciting. So I'm choosing to approach this with a fresh eye, an open eye, a
Mm.
questioning eye. It's not something that it's not set in stone. There's still a newness to it. This thesis, as it were, is the script. It's the bones. The difference is I would say it's not as if it's copyright material and I have to pay royalties. I'm engaged with the author and we can see where we can deepen it or enhance it or flesh it out in a different way from, like Kenny said, the 75-year-old perspective as opposed to the 25-year-old perspective.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that element. And it's funny when Ken and I are working, again, it's that up and down. There are many times when we're just button heads because the mover in me is approaching something differently. And the visual person in Ken is visualizing something. So we sense, and so combining all of our strengths to create the best project possible. And as Ken and I right now are very early conversations, and it's always important to us, no matter what we're doing, is what is the relevancy? We are bringing this forward, yes, for ourselves, but how can we ignite and provoke and evoke our audience as well to get something from this? Yes, we want them to be entertained. And I remember we went to a talk back once, and I thoroughly appreciated what this person said. We want to know what you're going to talk about when you're in the car and you're leaving the theater. And we want people to have something to talk about in the car when they're leaving the theater. And it's not about like or dislike. I mean, of course, we all want to be like, but it's, wow, this made me think, or question, or consider, or even as a fellow artist, how did they go about doing that? Would I have done it that way? Maybe yes, maybe. I mean, the whole range of conversations that can transpire, the whole range of emotions that can transpire from putting on a show, from creating a piece of art and a live piece of art and presenting it.
I love what you just said about, okay, we've seen the performance, we're getting into the car, we're driving to dinner, and we're thinking, what, what'd you think? What'd you think? And we're hearing that conversation in the car, and
Yes.
so yeah, I love what you said. So I want to circle back a little bit. I want to contrast. So one of the performances was right at the tail end of COVID, the gin game that you guys did, and with Ed Geron and Kathy Marden, and is but it's not the Ennui gin game. It's a different playwright, correct?
The what? I didn't hear
Oh,
the.
okay. There isn't there a gin game by is it a existentialist playwright? I thought it was
No,
Ennui.
this is, I think, isn't it Edward Albee, Ken?
Albie, that's right. That's right.
Albee.
That's right. Right.
It's
Okay. So
Albee who wrote the Gin Game, and we co-produced and directed that. Ed and Kathy wanted to do this piece, and they both wanted to work with us.
okay. So this is Edward Albee. He's sort of a spiritual follower of Camus. I'd love for you because that's a fairly
Oh yeah.
recent performance that is sort of about the end of life and the
Yes.
idea that you come to a decision at the end of life as you're locating yourselves in the end of life, and you're saying, okay, and Ken mentioned at the beginning of this interview that, he doesn't know where he's going to be in another 10, 20 years, for example. And so he's thinking about his legacy. And so the legacy, the end of life decision of I'm thinking of my legacy here. I'm going to bring it to the young students. I'm going to bring it to the younger professors. I'm going to show them what it looks like to have a life in the theater. I'm going to throw myself open in a way that I didn't do when I was 25. So,
Yeah.
you know, you see where I'm going. I'd love to hear you contrast the gin game with Caligula and Meursault. It comes from the same seed, I realize, but I wonder if that was sort of brewing in your head as you were directing the gin game, Ken. I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think for me, what it is a lot about is looking at the futility and how people can go down with futility or just exist in it or
You know
uh,
what? It's not Edward Albee. I'm sorry, I looked it up, Elizabeth. It was written by D.L. Coburn.
Right, I see that, but I mean, there was an original. Okay, so all right, so yeah, then you can take me there. There's the whole tradition of absurd theater,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so this is
Beckett,
part of that.
Beckett is an example, and Ionesco, those are examples where things are taken out of real situations, and then we live with that. What do we do with that? How do we look at it abstractly, as well as the experience of watching performers on stage with it? What was interesting for me is Ruby Cohen. She was a professor at UC Davis when I was there. Comparative literature was her field, and she was an intimate with Beckett. And I found that to be an interesting twist and turn for me. She and I would spend hours. She just gave me her time. I was never a student of hers directly. She heard about my idea of doing this absurd turn about the actor through Camus. And she and I spent hours talking. And I asked her, having been a translator of French, to look at if I was getting the essence of the Frenchness of Camus in what I was choosing to do, the actual scripts. So the scripts that I used were never just one particular translator. They were looked at as a collective comparative translation. And I remember standing at the front porch. We were saying goodbye to each other after a meeting, standing at the front porch, and she looked at me and she said, "This is good, Ken."
Ah, right.
I went, "Okay."
Okay. To me, coming from, if you would have said, I'm starting out in I'm 20, 25, I'm in that part of my life. Um, I'm, coming to the stage for a really important performance in my first real, my meaty intellectual performance of my young life. And I am doing this incredibly, well, what could be an incredibly hopeful, I'm doing an incredibly hopeful performance. I'm doing, you know, Midsummer's Night's Dream. And now I have this big arc in my career. 50 years later, I've had this beginning, which was bathed in classicism and hopefulness. And now at the end of my career, I revive that classicism and hopefulness. This seems to be the opposite. Like I'm beginning my career and I'm looking at the choice to be surviving through absurdity or not,
Yes,
Yeah.
versus the end of my career where I'm actually looking at a reprisal of the choice to be living through absurdity or not.
yes.
So I can see more that it would be and in between that 50 years is full of hope and production and artistic endeavor and creativity and gifts to the community. So where to go? Where's that absurdity? Where did that link take you?
Just being persistent and not being accepted. There's many parts of me that have never been accepted as an artist, and to just do it anyway. Bonnie and I we've come up against each other at different times as well. We have different creative sensibilities and different projects or processes. And so it's always been that question. I've never doubted who I am. I just didn't define myself as an artist. And now in the last decade, realizing that's all I've been. So I'm changing.
Okay, I get it now. So that's the rock. That was the
Yeah.
That's
rock you were pushing.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Excellent. Yes, that's it.
And
Okay.
sometimes that rock might feel like granite, another time it might feel like sandstone, another time it might feel volcanic. It doesn't matter. It's still a rock.
I get it now. Okay. Like I said, at the beginning of the interview, I was thinking, how does this come out of absurdity? This beautiful fruition, this flower garden. How did it come out of absurdity? Well, okay, it was the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's always
It
the
was the
journey.
journey. It was the journey. Okay, we got to go to a quick break, and before I get emotional, I think this is wonderful, and I can't wait to see it in person. You will be hopefully performing it here as well in Santa
Oh
Barbara.
yeah, yeah, because our the design team is here, and Bonnie and I live here, so we'll mount it here, and then we'll travel it to
Okay,
hopefully.
okay, okay. When we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about the legacy that you're leaving. You told me a little bit about that, and of course, last night Bonnie had the incredible actual a gift to me of many pages of the whole chronology of Drama Dogs, and looking at, 24 pages of what you guys have done is pretty incredible. And
That
I
was
want to talk.
Ken. Ken's the chronologer. He's
Okay.
wonderful at things like that. I gave
Okay.
you the condensed version of what it all means. I did like so if I used AI to come up with a summation that sounded pretty good after I'd inputted a ton of information.
Oh,
So
that is unbelievable because now that's going in your file that I have for almost 20 years. And that is unbelievable. But that is, so I want to talk a little bit, the high points for you of that legacy in the last little 15 minutes that we have of the interview. Oh, so Richard's telling us he's doing us that quick break sign. So we got to go to quick break. Then we get back. Just pick maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 productions that really
Okay, that's easy.
that you take with you, on this
Yep.
journey. Okay,
Yep, yep.
don't turn that down. Back in a minute. I'm personally celebrating Kenneth Gilbert, who I've seen on stage, I don't know how many times, and I've witnessed his directorial chops and his somatic chops, and I've known him and Ebony Lewis, both as co-artistic directors of Drama Dogs, our own theater company. They've been around since 1993. I don't know how many thousands of people, millions of people they've actually influenced and touched through their art. Kenneth is just now realizing after 50 years of being an artist that he's an artist. How did that happen? It's just a great story. Don't turn that down. Back in a minute.
All right.
I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
All right.
Okay.
We'll wait.
Yeah, we'll wait for you.
Thank you.
It's funny. It is. It's pretty. I mean, the whole trajectory. I mean, it's amazing, and it's really
is
amazing. I can't think if you said to me, "Okay, Elizabeth, go back, to your undergraduate years in Boston. I was at Tufts. Go back to your undergraduate years, and and then I took an honors year
Oh,
and came back to Tufts with an honors thesis, which wasn't done at the time. But if they said to me, "Oh, we really would like you to remount the reading of your honors thesis to defend your honors thesis," I would say, "Go to hell." I mean,
Yeah.
no, you go to hell.
I know I would say, no, are you kidding?
That's funny. I
Are
love
But
you,
it.
I
are you
think,
kidding? Are you?
Elizabeth, I think this is about courage. You talked about bravery, and
Yes, yes.
this is about Ken's personal courage. At the time, he didn't have the courage, the bravery, the wherewithal to audition to do the MFA, even though the skill, the talent, everything was there, the package was there, but his emotional heart wasn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's this fight. I think I've noticed about you and Ken anyway. As far Ken maybe very specifically, but you can be almost too intellectual to let yourself be who you are because you're
Yeah.
Yeah,
constantly analyzing yourself. It's like, okay,
yeah,
what about this? What's the precedent for this? What's the intellectual
right,
background for
right.
this? What's this? And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go to the heart before I go to the head, you go to the head first.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, who knows what other reasons we come up with it? We stop ourselves from doing what it is we need to do. One of my dance teachers, she was friggin' brilliant. We were all ready to just like fly with her and do her company and do her work and do whatever. But there was that part of her that I don't know, like you said, this intellectual thing of, well, no, I have to prove it. I have to validate this. And sometimes, you know what? It doesn't have to be,
All
quote, perfect.
right.
Sometimes you just have to get it out there because that is good enough.
All right. We
So
need to get
I
started here.
can
We need to
so
get.
identify with
We,
this. And before we go back on the air, I just want to tell you a turning point in my life, 2008. So I had been an appraiser and, probably 20 years or so at that point. and the Historical Society asked me to do a course at Westmont and do use the museum materials, the objects in the museum here in Santa Barbara as classroom. So I was talking to them about material culture in a museum setting and what that means and how a museum can throw a real wrench into the human psyche and in the interpretation of a piece of something in front of it. In other words,
Wow.
the cultural baggage it can throw around, the intellectual baggage, blah, blah, blah. So I was teaching this course, and I'm standing in front of a 17th century dowry chest that had been
Mm.
brought here from Spain. And I've got 20 students in front of me, and I'm describing the background, the cultural history, the political environment of Spain, why it was coming to the New World, how this was handled, but what the style of carving was, how it evoked the Spanish Habsburgs, yada da 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 da. And all of a sudden, I kind of fainted, and I was on my knees in front of this stupid piece, and I had all these students around me, and I realized the piece wasn't talking to me. I was talking to me.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
So the object
Wow.
was not talking to me, had nothing to say to me, but I had all this background, all this education and all this training, and all that was talking to me, and the piece wasn't even there. It was gone. It was my head. And
Huh.
so then said, I got to change because I will never be able to communicate what an object is in symbolic terms unless I throw myself away from all this monkey brain going on when I
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at something.
Okay.
And
We
I had to retrain after that because it sunk me so low, thinking I will never be able to interpret a work of art ever if I keep on going. You look at a painting, you say, oh, German Expressionism, like Max Ernst, blah, 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 Surrealism, blah, 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 that's the voice you hear. No, that shouldn't be. It should be the object first, then the voice later.
Yes.
So
Mm.
I get it. I get where Ken was, where he was like, okay, it's going to be me intellectualizing my way through. And that's
Yeah.
what I suffered from that for so many years, and until it was like, I got to see like a kid sees again,
Mm-hmm.
and try to throw it in a different part of my body, not my head.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I can
Wow.
identify with this.
What a
Okay, Richard,
moment.
let's go back. So we have what, about 15 minutes? Let's just talk about 3 or 4 key performances. Um, and I thank you both very much. I think this is, and I'm looking forward to having you come over and talk about the legacy gift to
I
the
can't wait to
university.
do that. I'm just thrilled to spend
Yeah,
time with you about that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I've already been, as you can hear by my train of thought, I've been thinking about it hard. So I think I've got a really good approach that might work beautifully for the legacy gift. Has to be couched in real tangible market analysis, but it also, in that way of describing it, we can get quite poetic and we can say, well, the market appreciates this, the market appreciates that. Like I said, the market
Mm.
appreciates the fact that
Mm-hmm.
a performer of age comes back to teach young performers by just virtue of his bodily presence on the stage. That is a value of itself. So
Well, see, that makes a context to UC Davis. Why would they not receive the gift with the value that we offer?
yeah, right. So it's
you
double-edged
ready to
sword.
start?
Yeah, so just very quickly, I have done probably 15 archives like this all over California and elsewhere, just pretty much Western states, but I've done a lot of archives for a lot of universities where I give value in a way that is based in the market, but is also very philosophical.
Cool.
Usually the universities buy it completely because they understand what provenance can mean to a gift. So
Yes.
Wow.
so I guess, yeah, I
Wow.
guess I'm a good candidate for what we're thinking about. Anyway, Richard, let's go back real quick.
In 3, 2, 1, you're alive.
Welcome back. I promised you that I'd be talking with Ebony Lewis and Kenneth Gilbert about the gifts that they've given from 1993 on at Drama Dogs, a theater company based here in Santa Barbara. And I asked them before the break if maybe they'd put their heads together and talk about 3 or 4 really influential works that they have brought us. And who would like to start? Ken? Bonnie?
Kenny, why don't you start? Because we actually didn't talk about it. We got so involved in all these other wonderful things. I'm thinking,
Well, something that I think was important for both of us is when we both started, we realized that we wanted to express our own voices as well as collective voice together. And so early on, I did a one-man show called If It's a Boy, and it was about the experience of being a man in the world. I worked
yeah.
with an installation artist and a musician. And the three of us collaborated a piece, a theater piece, and we did it in an innovative way. We put 50 chairs on small platforms that could pivot around. So the audience was completely independent in chairs in the middle of center stage theater. And then there were 6 stations around the perimeter of this audience, and each one of them dealt with an aspect of being male. So there was that. I did that. And then in reflect of that, Bonnie did a piece called The Cave of My Heart, which was based on a menopausal stage of life for a woman at the age of 45. What's it like to face this? And she did a lot of both of these pieces were based on doing literary research on essays, plays, scenes, lyrics of music that we could compile because we both love to put pieces together. We love to do a full play that's been written by a playwright that gives context to a thought coming from one singular voice.
And we also did for, excuse me, Kenny, but we also did for Cave of My Heart, we had a couple workshops with women of different ages. And we went through a couple movement processes, writing processes. So I worked with some friends of mine and we just gathered info that way as well.
So we had both the male experience of If It's a Boy and we had the female experience of The Cave of My Heart. And it allowed us to really go into what is it like for us as a male and a female and a partnership. Bonnie directed me and I directed her. And so
Ah,
we played it all out that
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
it was important. It was a crossover in a way. I had already done a one-man show. Bonnie had not acted in a one-person show before this. So it was a real leap for her. Later on, she did Queen Undaunted, Margaret of Anjou, as a
yes,
one.
I love that performance. That's
That's
my highlight for my career looking at Bonnie's work. I loved that
That's
performance.
one of my pinnacle pieces as well,
Loved it.
and working with Ginny Weber on that. But before I go into that, I'm realizing, Ken, as you are talking, in those two pieces, Cave of My Heart and If It's a Boy, we also discovered ourselves some of our signatures. We began integrating media. We used all different ways of telling a story and the creativity that sort of became anchored and became a signature for us. I think
Using
having
the theater as metaphor for
yep,
expression. It
yep, yep,
became
yep.
that.
And then how we brought it to life, the tools, the
Okay.
techniques. But back to Queen Undaunted, what was fun about that is I'd never read so much Shakespeare in my life, and I worked with local author, playwright, and my friend and scholar, Ginny Weber. And she said, I collaborated with the Bard. So we went through all of the history plays to uncover the theme of this one woman and her journey from 14 to in her 60s, the crone in Richard the Third, and telling her story. And that was quite a powerful piece for
It
me.
certainly was.
Quite
It
a, for
certainly
me.
certainly
Yeah.
was. It just okay, so we have time for one more, I think. Don't we,
Go,
Richard?
Kenny.
We have time for one? Yeah, okay, one more.
So Bonnie wanted to, as we were evolving as a theater company, I was stepping forward more as a co-director with Bonnie or as a singular director of a piece that she was performing in. And that's how had designed it. And Bonnie stepped up and said, I have this play I want to direct. I have to direct it. It's not just a choice. I have to direct it. Uh, Defying Gravity, which was about the Challenger explosion and the survivor. That's when you met me about in acting. I played Monet.
Yes.
Coached me on how to paint so that in the space of the play, I could paint as Monet, who was a
Yes,
magical vehicle in the piece about what you do with grief and loss when you don't know how to put it into perspective. And then learning that Monet forced perspective, and that's why he could show up as a poetic presence in this devastating tragedy of a mother and a daughter and their loss. And
got
Bonnie
it.
directed this, and her vision was about ladders and reaching to the sky. And she arrived in a way that was unique to her voice about being a movement person, directing people on stage. It was a small cast, beautifully designed. We did have live accompaniment with that. We worked with Eric Gillespie.
That was the next leap that we did. We introduced live accompaniment to our productions. Instead of having a soundtrack, we had a musician, and it was very exciting and wonderful.
One of my favorite moments is that the magic of having a lifesaver fall onto the beach, which was a gift of the mother to of the daughter to the mother, and at the devastation of the crash, that this lifesaver would find its way on the shore. And there was a moment where Monet would pick it up and to speak to the lifesaver. And I remember every time Eric and I had it down. He knew where my gestures were, and he could find that moment, and he found the sound of that discovery, which is a huge metaphor for the entire piece.
So, some of the actors that you've discovered. So, if okay, this is kind of going to be way out there, and you don't have to mention names, but I've always been curious about this. Having reached a certain age in my life, I've always been curious. I'm now mentoring other appraisers. I've got one in town here who's quite a genius, and I'm teaching her what I know. And it's amazing to me. It's like if someone was interviewing me and they would say, Elizabeth, of the students that you've had, who is the one that's most like you? I would have mentioned this particular woman that I'm mentoring now. She's got a similar background. She's an Anglophile. She's, bilingual. Blah, 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 blah. So, and she's interested in the kind of art I was interested in at her age, etc. So, Ken, all right, a young actor.
Mm-hmm.
Of those you schooled, who's the most like you?
The one that just comes to mind immediately is one who we were working with in what we called Dance Me to the End of Love. It was an ensemble of 8 pieces, short plays. We had an ensemble of 6 actors, 3 men, 3 women. And this young man was just defiant. He just didn't want to do the physicality that I kept asking his director. And I would look at him and say, would you just kick the dirt? Just kick the dirt. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And then one day he came out and he said, I'm just going to kick the dirt. So he did. It was awkward. It wasn't quite connected yet. And Bonnie and I were on stage with the actors. So the 6 of us, there were 4 others besides Bonnie and myself. We were on stage live with them. It was like a tango cotillion where we would step off to the side, we would watch the scene, and then we would reassemble the stage into the next scene. So I'm on stage, downstage left. He comes on downstage left. And I burst into tears because he kicked the dirt. He just came out and kicked the dirt, and the actor went away, and the character was alive. And I was just blown away. It was breathtaking to see. And I realized that that's how it felt for me doing the one-man show, where I was leaving the intellect of it and stopped the fighting of it and just did it.
Ah, beautiful. Bonnie, how about you?
I mm, I don't know if I really have one, Elizabeth, but what I started thinking about during our discussion, one of our strengths, I believe, as directors is we see people, we see the performer, and we want to embrace that and allow that artist, that performer to come forward and 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 with that to find ways to embody the character whose story that we're telling. So I've had a number of people that I don't know if they're me, but I've just been moved and have had a wonderful time either being on stage with them and or directing them. I've learned and also to see someone grow. Very
I,
exciting.
I think if we gave it context for you regarding that, I think it happened for you when you found your character as Ruth in Collected Stories. That the actor you worked with met you in a way that was unique, and
Right.
you could really prosper and develop as Ruth.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Oh, of
Thanks.
course,
I
that
will.
is a biblical Ruth. Of course, there is a connection with a younger female in that story too.
Yeah, there is. I don't know. We didn't really examine that in the play.
Yep. Well, that is some echoes there. Oh, how
Yes, sure
interesting.
there is. Yeah.
How interesting. Okay, well, I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys, and then hopefully we have some chance to talk about the legacy project and how I can help with that in the future. But it suffice to say, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Bonnie, for all that you've brought to the community. And I am so proud and so humbled by your bravery and courage, Ken, to actually face 50 years, both good and bad, and to show an academic institution what it's like to actually come back and say something important again and again and again, and to say, this is what it's like. Here it is. Here's the body, here's the mind, here's the heart. This is what I trained to do,
Mm-hmm.
and here is what it's like. All of you people see it now. You didn't before, now you do. So I'm very proud of that.
Mm.
Very proud of that. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Always.
Love ya. Bye.
Love you back.
Love you.
Okay, Richard. Yeah. So what we'll do is I'm going to look right now for the music. I'll send that to Richard right away, and then Richard will send me a link to this. And you already know if there's something that anybody said on the show that you want to capture and put into bullet points, or do you use the audio, use anything you want to use. It's totally it's totally yours. Richard and I have that agreement with the station that the artist owns the recording. So
Great.
however you want to
Great.
use it.
Elizabeth, I do think that this interview will help me get into UC Davis. And now,
I
now
was
I want
just
to
thinking
cry.
that.
Now I want to cry because this will be a petition to say, you got to do this, people. You got to
Okay,
do
well,
this.
all right, you can tell them. So this radio station reaches entire Central Coast. We've been around since the 50s. This is highly influential radio station that reaches many, many people, and it is archived. We have won, I mean, Richard's won a Peabody. This is an important station. We on the Central Coast have been following Drama Dogs, our station manager, myself, Richard, etc. All of the staff here knows of Drama Dogs. When I bring up I'd like to do an interview with you guys, they never ever say no. And so
Whoa.
you can couch that when you send it to,
Whoa.
send it to the committee at Davis. If the Central Coast is giving you, I don't know how many hours of airtime over 20 years, they need to give Ken Gilbert an hour.
You know what, Kenny? We have a conversation. Elizabeth might have to pick your brain again to get those bullet points really